Hello tankers and tankettes, and welcome to A Tale of Two Tanks. Now you might think, looking at both these replays, that they are in fact the same tank, and well, at least in theory you're right. Both games are going to be of the tier 8 Chinese heavy tank, the 110, but the 110 is a very different machine depending on which gun you have mounted, and what we're seeing here is my very last game playing with the stock 122. Well, not quite the stock 122, it's the second 122, the one you unlock from the IS-2. Basically, it's very similar in characteristics to the other 175 average pen 122mm guns that you get on the Russians, and at tier 8 it is not very good at all. And what's worse is that you are stuck with it for a very long time. This gun is what you're going to have to use unless you've got a lot of free XP saved up before you can get to the top gun. And those two guns make such a big difference that, well, you know, I started off with that Charles Dickens reference for a reason. So what we have here is something very like what the IS-6 has, but with normal matchmaking. And that's problematic when you can see tier 10s. It's not the only tank that gets this sort of gun at tier 8 that's just a regular tank, but to my knowledge all the rest are mediums. And nobody's particularly fond of those. I mean, the T-44 I know for sure gets that gun. The T-34-2 also gets that gun. But neither of them are particularly well regarded. And, well, this machine with this gun is not particularly well regarded either. Now, why is it bad? Well, it's because that 100mm gun is so damn expensive. It costs the same to research in XP as the M62 122mm that the ST1, the IS-4 and the IS-8 use. So this is a tier 9 and 10 research cost for a tier 8 heavy tank gun. And yet it's no better than the other tier 8 heavy tank guns. It's a pretty decent 100mm gun, but it is really expensive. It's actually also expensive in terms of its credit cost as well. It costs something like 40 to 45,000 more credits to buy on top of the already ridiculously expensive research cost, because the other heavy tank guns for their tier are something around 44 to 45,000 experience each. The 100mm costs 59,000. And now, if I've counted up correctly, it is the 6th most expensive gun at tier 8 overall. The rest are all tank destroyer guns or artillery guns, and are, generally speaking, bigger, punchier, nastier guns. So you have to stick with this crappy 122mm for a very long time. I think it took me something like 50 or 60 battles. And in part it was because I had game after game like this. And it's, well, if you've ever played with one of the Russian 122mm with 175 pen and the 3.4 second aim time and the 0.46 accuracy, you know how exactly, or even exactly how horrifically unreliable these guns are. And even with matchmaking like this, even with fully aimed shots, and not all my shots were fully aimed, you know, this was the very last battle with this gun. This was me just, in parts, just being frustrated and pulling the trigger, because hey, if I sit and fully aim, chances are it's going to miss anyway, and some of the fully aimed shots it did miss anyway. But yeah, it's just, if there wasn't some light at the end of the tunnel, you would not go through this. You could not grind this tank with this gun. It would be horrific. And it is still horrific. I mean, it is easily as bad as the T28 prot grind. In fact, it might even be worse than the T28 prot grind, because I think that gun was cheaper to research, although probably more expensive to buy, because it's a 120mm gun. But still, it is just, it's horrific. And the only thing that I have played this year that has otherwise been a greater test of my sanity and a test of my resolve has been the Challenger. And actually the Challenger, in the end, I gave up and basically spent a whole bunch of free XP. In fact, all my remaining free XP to get the Charioteer. And that's partly why I had to grind out this gun, well, not this gun, the 100mm gun, fully. without using free XP because the Challenger was just too much for me. So yeah, don't do that. Don't research, don't grind through the Challenger and the 110 at the same time. It's not recommended for your mental health. You will definitely lose a few marbles. So far I've done just over 1,000 damage, and you know what? That's all the damage I'm going to get to do. And like I said, this was a perfectly average game. I think my best game in those 50 odd battles was something a little over 2,000 damage. And, well, bear in mind, I mean, that would be, for an IS-6 or a 112 or something like that, or a T-34-3, fairly profitable, but this is just a regular tank. So, in terms of the XP you get, in terms of the credits you get, not particularly profitable at all. And that's why the grind takes so long, or why it took me so long, because I kept having very, very poor XP results, and because it's a really expensive gun, yeah. Now, the KV-4 is actually in kind of a similar situation because you've got a unique top gun for the KV-4, but that's a much cheaper gun to research, it's a much cheaper gun to buy, and you can mount it on the stock turret. For the 110, you need the tracks, the upgraded turret, and of course the gun itself. Now, if you do what I did, you can save yourself a bit of pain. You can spend 500,000 credits buying the upgraded track module, which increases your load weight without having to unlock the upgraded suspension. So that saves you something like 14 or 15,000 XP, but you've still got 15,000 XP of the turret on top of the 59,000 that you need for that top gun. So, yeah. It was a horrible experience, and I don't know how I managed to persist through, and the real question is, well, was it worth it? Well, this is the very next battle. This is a Himmelsdorf game. It's terrible matchmaking by comparison. It's a tier 10 game, although not that many tier 10s. There's a lot more tier 8s and 9s, well, I think more tier 9s than anything else, but lots of things I can hurt, basically. Some of the tier 10s, in fact, all of the tier 10s, apart from their arty, I will struggle with. But the tier 8s, I shouldn't have any particular issue with. The tier 9s, rather. And, of course, there's a couple of tier 8s there as well. So, this is much better matchmaking. And although, in some ways, this gun is not an improvement over the 122, the soft stats in terms of bloom are identical for the most part. I think there's one or two that's slightly better, but it's got a better aim time, better accuracy, much better accuracy. Oh boy, you will feel that accuracy. And it does lose about 30 damage per minute, so you lost a tiny little bit of DPM, and of course your shell damage is less because you're dropping from a 122 to 100mm, but it is just unquestionably the better gun. This is the gun you want to use. Now, one of the things you'll notice down at the bottom there is that it uses APCR as its prem ammo, and that's not the case for a lot of the Chinese tanks, actually. A lot of them use heat premium ammo, and that's really nice. And you'll see at later points of the battle that it's really nice that I have APCR to play with. Whereas if I'd been playing with a 122, well, I would have struggled a lot more. So I've taken one hit from the Bulldog, and, well, this thing, obviously, pike nose, you have to be careful how you aim it exactly. The armor's pretty decent. I don't know if it's quite as good as the IS-3. In fact, it almost certainly isn't as good as the IS-3, because, you know, hey, the IS-3. But all around, this is a very, very decent tier 8 heavy. Now, as you can see, there's a bunch of the enemy team, including a chunk of their tier 10s that have come round up the Banana Street and are actually coming up round behind us. Now, the Churchill GC has put himself in a position to derp one as they come round the corner, but alas, he misses. And, well, I do get a shot into the IS-4 as he backs off, which, with the 175, the 122 rather, there's no way that would have happened. 175 is the pen. I don't know why I thought of the pen rather than the caliber, but whatever. So the arty's gone down, but fortunately this E100 has also reacted to this, and although the rest of the team is all streaming down the other side of the hill, we can at least tie up a couple of the enemy top tiers, if not tackle them entirely. So if the E100 hadn't come here, this would have been very bad. There's no way I could have held back these enemy machines. I mean, I could have tracked the IS-4 if he tried to come up, but he would have had his repair kit down. I could not have reloaded fast enough to retrack him before he could get over and start shooting at me. Plus, he's got an IS-8 buddy. But the fact that we've got the E-100 here is enough to keep these guys from pushing. In fact, the IS-8 is backed off because I think he assumed, given the number of tanks that we had up here, that we would have a lot of tanks that would then rush these guys, because there's only 2 of them. The other enemies that pressed up the banana line went west over towards the cap, and you can see actually at least one of them is now capping. So the IS-4's, I think, realised there's not really a lot up here, so he's starting to try and do some work against this E-100, but this is 2 versus 1. Well, at least the tanks that are kind of, you know, within this immediate area. The IS-8 is still back there. I thought initially he might have backed off entirely, but no, he has actually just gone down to that corner where he was last spotted. So I'm onto my APCR now, and for the lower front plate shots, heat would be fine, but at higher tiers especially, heat can be problematic because that kind of shot there, trying to get an axle tracking shot, trying to do that with heat is problematic. And of course there's a lot of things at the higher tiers that have got spaced armour as well. So I've just been shot with a heat shell myself, and there we go. I think that one went in my tracks, and I'm about to waste a shell, but oh no I don't. Okay, it was somebody else that fired. The VK's come back as well, by the way. So yeah, I mean, heat at higher tiers is just, it can work, but you have to be a lot more careful with it. And I didn't really need the IS-8, the APCR there, but yeah. So yeah, heat against the side of an IS-8 would have been a problem. Against the IS-4, the track and the side, it would have been a problem. So anyway, so I'd kind of hoped that the E-100 would be a bit more aggressive there, that they would take the lead. I mean, at least they had come back to that corner, but it was, I don't know, I felt like it was up to me to do the pushing there, and I took a big chunk of damage in the process. But with a bit of cajoling, that E-100 did get in motion, and well, it looked like the push round from the south was going to be rather successful, and then the last couple of remaining enemy tanks just stabilised things. The IS-7 and the ST-1, or IS-3 rather. There was no ST-1, what am I talking about? Anyway, so this IS-8 is basically alone, and we've got him surrounded, and there we go, he's just taking a hit from the 100, and I get the kill. So it is now 4 against 2, but one of those is, of course, an IS-7. As to what we've got left, well, the E-100 is also, of course, going towards where we know the enemies are. The the FV215B is already there. The VK died, unfortunately, but there's also an M103 left alive. So, in theory, well, you can see the M103 trying to get around, but he's got very low health. In theory, I might have a good chance to sneak up, and we can surround these guys, basically, these remaining enemies. But I am loading some APCR just in case, because one of these is an IS-7, and although the regular AP pen on this is pretty good, comparable to other tier 8 heavies, and, you know, it's so nice. You jump up quite a lot in terms of pen. You go from 175 to, what is it, 215, 220, something like that. So it's a pretty good jump. It's like 40 extra penetration, but as it turned out, it was not necessarily, because that was the IS-7's rear armour. So the IS-3 is down, and it's now just a scrabble for the last bit of damage, basically. So, oh, there we go. E-100 gets a shot in. I might even get the kill. And there we go. So this is already, or this was already, the very best game I'd had damage-wise with the 110. I mean, all my previous games, as I mentioned, I think I'd struggled to get 2,000 plus damage. Like, if I got 2,000 damage in a game, that was a good game with the 122. Very first game with the 100 mil, and already I just, you know, nearly 3,000, second on the team. The tier 10s, I think, on our team ultimately did better than the enemy team's tier 10s, and I was able to support them really nicely. So, you know, I still had that thing of the 2-tier matchmaker, meaning I was in a position where it felt like unhealthily dependent on my teammates, but I was at least able to support and do damage and do something. But yeah, it's still, even games like this, you think, well, okay, if there was fairer matchmaking, it would have been anyway. But anyway, that's a whole other topic. So yeah, is it worth it? Is it worth the pain? I would say, I mean, bear in mind when I said it was 50 odd battles, that was with a premium account. I would say if you're going to buy this tank, get an absolute metric buttload of free XP. And that's actually what I did with the KV4. I knew I was going to have to grind through with the 122. And so I saved up a lot of free XP, I think about 30+ thousand. And I had to play a couple of battles with the 122, but it wasn't many. And I think sort of 6, 7, 8 battles in, I already had the long 107mm gun, which I could mount on the stock turret. There is no flexibility with the 110 in comparison. You have to go through the turret, you have to get that gun, and it's just way more expensive, so you're going to need a lot more free XP to do it, and you might even want to consider converting free XP with gold, which is not something I do very often, but I don't know. With the Top Gun, it's a very nice tier 8 heavy tank. Without the Top Gun, it is atrocious. It really is. It's one of the worst tier 8 grinds in the game. It easily stands alongside the T28 Prot. In fact, it may even be worse than the T28 Prot. So yeah, it's pretty damn bad as far as stock grinds go. And like I said, for the XP cost of the gun, it does not fit the rest of the stats of the gun at all. But I can only guess it's because, of course, the Chinese tier heavy, the Chinese heavies even start with tier 7, and so the research costs are bumped up to reflect that or something. I don't know, but it just feels pretty crappy when you're going through it, unfortunately. And it's one of those ones that Wargaming could well stand to take a look at. So there you go, a double dose of my own games. Most of the games you'll see, at least in the coming couple of weeks, will probably be ones from the archive, because I don't play tanks that much anymore, but hey, you already knew that. And in the meantime, well, you guys are still sending me plenty of matches as well, so you'll definitely still be seeing a lot of tanks content. It's just it'll be mostly viewer tanks content, so I hope that's okay. Anyway, if you enjoyed this pair, you can hit the like button, you can leave any comments below, you can subscribe to my channel, and as always, stay tuned for more.